Before we get started, make sure to subscribe to the channel and like this video. That way, you'll always stay connected to our stories and never miss the next adventure. Una had survived hostile corporate boardrooms, budget cuts that would make an accountant weep, and once, memorably, a 3-hour faculty meeting about whether the coffee machine should be moved 5 feet to the left. She had, in her own estimation, paid her dues to the universe's cruel sense of humor. So naturally, the universe decided she hadn't suffered enough. "You'll be teaching the young ones," General Wolf said, his canine features arranged in what might have been a smile, but looked more like a warning. His office aboard the Quantum Reach station was all metal and efficiency, the kind of place where feelings went to die. "It's a great honor." Una looked at the datapad he'd handed her. Then she looked at him. Then back at the datapad. "These are children." "Juveniles, yes. Predator species juveniles." "Correct. I was told I'd be teaching diplomats. Adult diplomats. People with fully developed prefrontal cortexes and a basic understanding that biting is not an acceptable form of debate." General Wolf's ears twitched, which Una was learning meant he found something amusing but would rather die than admit it. Plans change. The Galaxy Union has decided that cultural exchange should begin earlier, much earlier. You'll be teaching basic English to the offspring of our military families stationed here. Una felt a headache forming behind her eyes, the kind that promised to be a long-term relationship. "And how old are these juveniles?" "The human equivalent of 8 to 12, depending on species maturation rates." Of course they were. "And they want to learn English because—" "They don't," General Wolf said flatly. "Their parents want them to learn English. Something about soft species communication skills being essential for the new galactic order. Personally, I think it's a waste of time, but I follow orders. As will you, Teacher Una." The way he said teacher made it sound like an insult and a dare at the same time. Una had been on the station for exactly 6 hours. Her quarters still smelled like the previous occupant, some kind of sulfur-based life form with questionable hygiene habits. Her coffee maker was 3 systems away on a transport that may or may not have been hijacked by pirates. And now this. "When do I start?" she asked, because apparently her survival instinct had taken a vacation. "Immediately," General Wolf said, standing. He was massive, easily 8 feet of muscle and fur, and the kind of presence that made you remember why humans weren't at the top of the food chain anymore. "Your classroom is on Deck 9, Section 4. The students are waiting." "Waiting?" Una repeated. "Well, they're contained. Waiting implies patience, which—" He gestured vaguely, as if patience was a concept that existed only in theoretical physics. Una stood, smoothing down her jacket, in a futile attempt to look authoritative. "Right. Contained predator children. Learning English. This is fine. Everything is fine." General Wolf's tail swished once. "Good luck, Teacher Una. Try not to let them eat you. The paperwork would be extensive." He said it deadpan. Una genuinely could not tell if he was joking. The walk to Deck 9, Section 4, took 10 minutes and several questionable life choices. Una passed crew members of 24 species, most of whom looked at her with what she chose to interpret as sympathy rather than pity. A few nodded. One, a crystalline being who communicated through light pulses, seemed to be laughing. Fantastic. The classroom door was reinforced. That should have been her first clue. The second clue was the sound coming from inside, a mix of growls, clicks, and something that sounded like furniture being murdered. Una took a breath, remembered that she'd once taught grammar to a room full of corporate executives who thought they were above the rules of language, and opened the door. Chaos. Pure, unfiltered chaos. There were 5 of them, and they were currently engaged in what appeared to be either a death match or recess, hard to tell. The largest, a bear-like creature covered in dark fur and attitude, was standing on a desk roaring at the ceiling. A reptilian juvenile with scales that shimmered green and gold was trying to climb the wall, claws leaving scratches in the metal. An insectoid, all compound eyes and chittering mandibles, was rapidly tapping every surface in reach. A feline predator, sleek and silver, watched the proceedings from the corner with narrowed eyes. And a smaller avian creature was attempting to build a nest out of what looked like Una's teaching materials. They noticed her approximately 3 seconds after she entered. The room went silent in that way that promised violence or mischief, possibly both. "Good morning," Una said, channeling every ounce of confidence she'd ever possessed. "I'm Una. I'll be your language instructor." The bear creature tilted its massive head. "You're small." "You're loud," Una countered. "We all have our gifts." A sound that might have been laughter came from the insectoid. The reptilian dropped from the wall, landing in a crouch that was absolutely designed to be intimidating. "You're prey," it hissed. "Why would we learn prey speak?" Una set her bag down slowly, deliberately. She'd learned long ago that showing fear to bullies, whether they were 12-year-old humans or 12-year-old apex predators, was a losing strategy. Because prey speak, as you so charmingly call it, is how half the galaxy conducts business. Because your parents want you to. And because, frankly, you're here and I'm here, so we might as well make the best of it. The reptilian narrowed its eyes. "I am Kumal of the hunting clans. I do not need soft speak." "And I am Nubash," the bear creature bellowed, because apparently volume control was not part of his species' skill set. "I am strongest." "Flick," said the insectoid, mandibles clicking in a pattern that seemed almost rhythmic. "They, them. You smell nervous." "She smells like she wants to run," the feline in the corner said softly, dangerously. "I like when they run." Una looked at the feline, really looked. There was something in those eyes beyond teenage bravado, something that had seen too much, too soon. "And you are?" "Someone who doesn't want to be here," the feline said. "Vun Lee," Flick supplied helpfully. "She's new. Very angry." "Thank you, Flick. Noted." Una turned to the avian, who was still attempting nest construction. "And you?" The bird looked up, feathers ruffling. "Hungry." "That's a mood, not a name." "Oh, Fezzik." Fezzik. Flick. Nubash. Kumal. Vun Lee. 5 juveniles who looked at her like she was either a joke or lunch. Jury still out. Una had taught difficult students before. She'd handled classroom management nightmares that would make veteran teachers weep into their coffee. But those students hadn't had claws, or multiple rows of teeth, or the ability to actually, literally, eat her. She pulled up a chair, turned it backward, and sat down, arms crossed over the back. It was a casual pose, the kind that said she wasn't afraid, even though her heart was doing its best impression of a drum solo. "Here's the deal," she said. "I know you don't want to be here. Trust me, I've had better assignments. But we're stuck with each other for the next 6 months, so let's establish some ground rules." "Rules are for prey," Kumal said dismissively. "Rules are for people who want to survive past adolescence," Una shot back. "Rule 1, no eating the teacher. I'm told the paperwork is extensive, and General Wolf seemed genuinely annoyed by the prospect." Nubash's laugh was more of a boom. "You are funny, small human." "Rule 2, you will try. I don't care if you think English is beneath you or unnecessary, or whatever superiority complex your species has going on. You will make an effort. In exchange, I will make this as painless as possible. And if we refuse? Vunneli asked, tail lashing. Una met her gaze. Then we all waste 6 months being miserable. You fail, your parents are disappointed, and I get reassigned to somewhere even worse than this. Trust me, there are worse places. I've seen the brochures. Silence. The kind where you could hear everyone thinking, calculating. What if, Flick said slowly, mandibles clicking thoughtfully. What if learning prey, learning human language, is interesting? Quimal scoffed. Interesting? Soft speak cannot be interesting. Actually, Una said, seeing an opening, human language can express approximately 15 different types of sarcasm. Your language has, what, 3? Quimal's scales rippled, a sign of agitation. We do not need sarcasm. We have threat displays. Right, but can your threat displays convey, I'm pretending to agree with you, while actually thinking you're an idiot? Because humans do that before breakfast. Flick's mandibles clicked rapidly, which Una was beginning to recognize as laughter. Even Nubash looked, intrigued. Show us, the big cub demanded, and Una, who had exactly 0 teaching materials prepared for predator juveniles, did what any good teacher does when completely unprepared. She improvised. Okay, let's start simple. Human communication isn't just about words. It's about context, tone, subtext. For example, if I say, that's great, like this, she put emphasis on the words, making them bright and genuine. It means I'm actually happy. But if I say, that's great, like this, she deadpanned it, voice flat. It means the exact opposite. Why? Nubash asked, genuinely confused. Because humans are complicated. We lie with the truth. We hide meanings inside meanings. It's how we survived being small and clawless, and definitely not at the top of the food chain. Quimal leaned forward slightly. You survived by deception. We survived by being smarter than things that wanted to eat us. Language was our weapon. Still is. That seemed to land. Predators understood weapons. So, Una continued, if you want to operate in the wider galaxy, if you want to negotiate with species that don't respect brute force, you need to understand how language works as a tool, how to use it, how to hear what's not being said. She could see it. The moment the cubs stopped thinking of this as punishment and started thinking of it as potentially useful. Even Vunneli's hostility had shifted to something closer to grudging interest. Let's try something, Una said. I'm going to teach you how to write "Good morning, teacher" in English. Then you're going to practice until you can do it without looking at the example. She pulled out a datapad, wrote the words clearly, and projected them onto the wall screen. Good morning, teacher. Simple. 2 words of greeting, 1 word of address. Copy it down. She handed out datapads to each student. They took them with varying degrees of suspicion and interest. What followed was, well, it was an attempt. That was the kindest word for it. Quimal's claws kept accidentally activating multiple characters at once. Nubash pressed so hard he cracked his first datapad and needed a replacement. Flick wrote too fast, mandibles clicking in frustration when the letters didn't keep up. Fezzik kept getting distracted by his own reflection in the screen. And Vunneli just stared at hers like it had personally offended her. But they tried. 20 minutes later, Una collected the datapads to review their work. The results were something. Quimal had written, Good morning, teacher. Nubash. Good morning, teacher. Flick. G0 D M0 N1 Engine teach 3er. Somehow they'd activated the numerical characters. Fezzik. Good. and then a drawing of a sun. Teacher. And Vun Li, who'd spent the entire time looking mutinous, had written, morning. Just that. One word. The bare minimum of compliance. Una looked at the mistakes, the misspellings, the sheer wrongness of it all. These were predator species, apex hunters, beings designed by evolution to be perfect killing machines. And they'd tried to write in a language that wasn't theirs, using tools not designed for claws and mandibles and beaks. They'd failed spectacularly. And somehow, seeing those mistakes, those earnest, terrible attempts, Una felt something shift in her chest. Not bad, she said, which was a monumental lie, but a necessary one. We'll work on it. That's sarcasm, isn't it? Flick said. The lying with truth thing? Little bit, Una admitted, but also genuinely, you tried. That's the starting point. Everything else is just practice. The class bell chimed, signaling the end of the session. The cubs gathered their things with varying levels of enthusiasm. As they filed out, Nubash paused. You are not as boring as I thought you would be, small human. You're not as likely to eat me as I thought you'd be, large cub. His booming laugh echoed down the corridor. When they were gone, Una sat alone in the classroom, looking at the projected writing on her datapad. 5 attempts, 5 failures, 5 tries. She smiled despite herself, saved the files, and began planning tomorrow's lesson. Outside, through the reinforced windows, the stars wheeled past in their eternal dance. The galaxy turned, indifferent to the small dramas of teachers and students. But in that classroom, something had started. Something that looked a lot like hope. Misspelled, and imperfect, and real. 3 weeks in, and Una had learned several important facts about teaching predator species. 1. They learned fastest when you framed everything as a competition. 2. They respected strength, which unfortunately she didn't have, so she had to substitute it with sheer stubborn refusal to be intimidated. 3. They absolutely, definitely, could not resist a good insult. That last one was proving particularly useful. So, let me get this straight, Kumal said, scales shimmering with agitation. You have different words for the same thing, depending on how you feel about it? Correct, Una said, writing on the board. For example, home, residence, dwelling, house, domicile. All mean the same place, but each one conveys something different. That is inefficient, Kwamal declared. My language has one word, nest place. Done. Right, but can nest place tell me if you're talking about a beloved childhood memory? Or a prison you're forced to return to every night? Nubash's ears perked up. Words can do that? Words can do anything if you arrange them right. They're weapons, tools, shields. Una tapped the board. You all come from warrior cultures, right? You understand strategy? 5 heads nodded, even Vun Li's, though she still maintained her corner position like a sullen shadow. Language is strategy. Every conversation is a battle. You can attack, defend, feint, retreat. The prey species you all love to mock? We won our place in the galaxy because we could out-talk, out-negotiate, and outmaneuver species that could tear us apart. That landed. Una could. See it in the way they sat up straighter, paid closer attention. So, Flick clicked thoughtfully, if I wanted to insult someone without them knowing I insulted them, human language could do that. Una grinned. Oh, absolutely. In fact, let's make that today's lesson. Advanced insults, how to destroy someone with grammar. For the first time since she'd started teaching, all 5 cubs looked genuinely excited. She spent the next hour teaching them the subtle art of the backhanded compliment, the false praise, the polite demolition. How "I appreciate your attempt" could be more devastating than any roar. How "that's certainly an interesting choice" could make an opponent question every decision they'd ever made. Kumal proved to be a natural. His first attempt: "Your scales are very shiny for someone of your limited intelligence." "Good structure," Una said, "but you front-loaded the compliment. Try burying the insult deeper. Make them have to think about it." His second attempt: "I admire your confidence in sharing opinions despite your obvious knowledge gaps." Better. Much better. Nubash struggled more. His species communicated primarily through volume and directness. Subtlety was not in his vocabulary, literally or figuratively. His attempts at polite insults came out sounding like genuine compliments, which frustrated him to no end. "Why is this so hard?" he bellowed. "I just want to tell someone they are stupid without using the word stupid." "Because," Una said patiently, "your brain is wired for honest communication. Humans had to evolve past that to survive. We're basically professional liars who occasionally tell the truth." "That is—" Nubash paused, searching for words. "That is actually impressive." "It's something," Una agreed. Flick caught on quickly, their insectoid mind processing the linguistic patterns faster than Una could teach them. Within 20 minutes, Flick was constructing sentences that made Una wince with their savage precision. "You've been practicing," Una said. "I have many siblings," Flick clicked. "Competition is survival. These skills are useful." Even Fezzik got into it, though his insults were more confused than cutting. "Your nest is adequately constructed," he tried. "That's just a statement, Fezzik." "Oh. Your nest is adequately constructed for someone with your limitations?" "There you go." The only holdout was Vun Li, who watched the proceedings with the same detached hostility she brought to every class. She hadn't written anything beyond the bare minimum since that first day, hadn't participated in any exercises unless directly commanded, hadn't smiled once. Una tried not to take it personally. Failed, mostly, but tried. After class, as the others filed out chattering excitedly about their new linguistic weapons, Vun Li remained seated. Una pretended to organize her materials, giving the young feline space. "Your language is pointless," Vun Li finally said. Una looked up. "Okay. I mean it. All these words, all this complexity. It is just hiding. Cowardice dressed up as cleverness." "That's one interpretation. My people did not hide behind words. We said what we meant. We fought with honor. And we lost." Vun Li's claws extended slightly, scraping the desk. "We lost to species like yours. Species that talk and never say anything real." Ah, there it was. The real wound beneath the hostility. Una set down her datapad and pulled up a chair, sitting across from Vun Li. Not too close, respecting the space predators needed, but close enough to matter. "Your people lost a war," Una said quietly. "I'm sorry. That's real, no hidden meanings. But language didn't beat you. Politics did. Alliances, economics, things that, yes, require communication, but blaming words for war is like blaming claws for hunting. They're just tools. Easy for you to say. Your people are winners." "My people," Una said, and her voice went hard, "spent thousands of years as prey. We were food for things with bigger teeth. We lost more often than we won. We're only here because we learned to adapt, to change, to use every advantage we could scrape together, including language." Vun Li's ears flicked, a sign of attention despite her aggressive posture. "You want to know why I teach," Una continued. "Why I'm here? light years from home, trying to get predator cubs to care about grammar? Not particularly. I'm going to tell you anyway. Because someone I loved died because two species couldn't understand each other's emergency protocols. A mistranslation. 3 words in the wrong order. And by the time they figured it out, it was too late. Una met Vun Lee's eyes. So, yeah, I think words matter. I think communication matters. I think learning to understand each other might actually save lives. Silence stretched between them, broken only by the ambient hum of the station. That is a sad story, Vun Lee said finally. It is. You are trying to manipulate me into participating. Little bit, Una admitted. Is it working? The ghost of something that might have been a smile crossed Vun Lee's face. No. But when she left, she took her datapad with her. And that night, when Una checked the class-shared folder, there was a new file. From Vun Lee, Chach Student 05. She opened it. 1 sentence. I am trying to understand why words matter to pray. The grammar was perfect. The spelling was flawless. And the meaning hit Una like a freight train. She saved the file, added it to her growing collection of student work, and allowed herself a small smile. Tomorrow, she would teach them about verb tenses and the subjunctive mood. She would watch Kamal get competitive about conjugation and Nubash accidentally shout every answer. She would see Flick process linguistic patterns at speeds that honestly seemed unfair. And Fezzik would ask questions that made no sense, but somehow still mattered. And maybe, just maybe, Vun Lee would write another sentence. Una looked at the words on her screen, at that one small declaration of effort wrapped in hostility. Yeah, she could work with this. She could absolutely work with this. Week 8 brought a new student, and with them, everything Una had carefully built started to crumble. The new cub arrived without warning, escorted by General Wolf himself, which should have been Una's first clue that this was going to be a problem. The general's expression was even more carefully neutral than usual, which on a canine face was quite the achievement. "Teacher Una," he said, "this is Kesh. She'll be joining your class." Kesh was feline, like Vun Lee, but where Vun Lee was sleek silver, Kesh was midnight black, with streaks of white, like battle scars through her fur. Her eyes were cold, calculating, and very, very old for someone who was supposed to be a juvenile. "Welcome," Una said, because what else could she say? Kesh looked at her, the way someone might look at a bug. Interesting for a moment. Then, beneath notice. "I am told I must attend this. I will comply. Do not expect more." She took a seat in the back corner, opposite from Vun Lee, and proceeded to radiate hostility like it was her personal superpower. The other cubs, who had been chattering excitedly about a writing exercise Una had planned, went quiet. That predator instinct, that awareness of hierarchy and threat, kicked in immediately. Kumal's scales rippled. Nubash's fur stood slightly on end. Flick's mandibles went still. Fezzik just looked confused, bless him. And Vun Lee stared at Kesh with something that looked like recognition and pain. "Right," Una said, refusing to let the sudden tension derail her. "Today we're working on descriptive writing. I want each of you to write about a memory, something that matters to you. Use the sensory words we practiced last week." It had been working. The cubs had been progressing, actually engaging with the material. Kamal had written a piece about his first successful hunt that showed genuine understanding of pacing. Nubash had described his homeworld with such enthusiasm that his grammar mistakes were almost charming. Flick had crafted something about molting that was weirdly poetic. Even Fezzik had managed a coherent paragraph about food. But now, with Kesh radiating disdain from the back of the room, everything shifted. Kumal kept glancing back at the new student. Nubash's usual booming confidence was muted. Flick's clicking was agitated, anxious. "I do not see the point of this exercise," Kesh said loudly, deliberately disruptive. "Describing memories in prey language." "Why?" "Because," Una said with far more patience than she felt, "being able to communicate experiences across species barriers is essential for galactic cooperation." "Galactic cooperation," Kesh repeated, loading the words with contempt. "Yes, the cooperation that destroyed my world, the cooperation that took everything from my people and called it peace." The room went silent. Una knew that tone, had heard it before in Vunli's voice, though never this raw, this bitter. "Kesh, I understand you're angry, but this classroom isn't the place for—" "For what? For truth?" Kesh stood, and despite being a juvenile, she moved with the controlled grace of a trained warrior. "You teach us to speak like prey, like weaklings who hide behind words because they cannot fight. You want us to forget what we are." "I want you to learn," Una said, keeping her voice level. "There's a difference." "No, there is not." Kesh looked at the other cubs, and Una could see the calculation in her eyes. Pack dynamics, hierarchy, dominance. "You all sit here, playing with human words, pretending it matters. You are being trained to be soft, weak, to forget the strength of your ancestors." "That is not what we are doing," Kumal said, but his voice lacked its usual certainty. "No? Then what are you doing, little hunter? Writing poetry?" Kesh's contempt was surgical. "Your ancestors would be ashamed." Kumal flinched, physically flinched. "Enough," Una said, and her teacher voice, the one that had silenced boardrooms and faculty meetings, cut through the tension. "Kesh, you will either participate respectfully, or you will leave." "I will do what I want," Kesh said. "You have no authority over me, pray." It was a challenge, direct and unmistakable. The kind Una couldn't back down from without losing every scrap of respect she'd built with these cubs. "Get out," Una said quietly. "Make me." The air in the classroom went electric. The other cubs watched, waiting to see what would happen when prey and predator locked wills. Una walked toward Kesh, slowly, deliberately. Every instinct screamed at her to back down, to call security, to not approach a juvenile predator who could absolutely cause her harm. She ignored every single one of those instincts. "You want to know why I teach predator species?" Una said, stopping just outside of striking range. "Because you all think strength is just physical. You think power is only claws and teeth. And you are catastrophically wrong." Kesh's eyes narrowed. "Power," Una continued, "is making someone believe what you want them to believe. It's controlling a narrative. It's walking into a room and owning it before you say a word. Humans conquered the galaxy not because we were strong, but because we understood that strength is just one tool among many. And honestly, it's not even the best one." "Soft species philosophy," Kesh sneered. "You talk because you cannot fight. I talk because when I fight, I win." Una held the young predator's gaze. "Ask General Wolf why he hired me. Ask him why, out of all the linguists in human space, he requested me specifically." She hadn't actually known this was true until she said it, but the way Kesh's ear twitched told her she'd guessed right. "You are here," Una said, "because someone thinks you need this class. Someone thinks you need to learn that there are other ways to be strong. You can reject that. You can sit in the back, radiating hostility and feeling superior. Or you can actually try to understand what I am teaching and decide for yourself if it has value. Your choice. For a long moment, Kesh said nothing. Then, slowly, deliberately, she sat back down. It was not agreement. It was not compliance. It was a strategic retreat, which was almost better. Una turned back to the rest of the class, her heart pounding, but her voice steady. As I was saying, descriptive writing. You have 30 minutes. Begin. The cubs bent over their data pads, all except Vun Li, who was staring at Kesh with an expression Una couldn't quite read. The rest of the class was tense, productive, but strained. Kesh did not participate, but she also did not disrupt. She simply watched, silent and evaluating. When the bell chimed and the cubs left, Una sagged into her chair. Her hands were shaking. Adrenaline crash. Wonderful. She was still sitting there, trying to convince her nervous system that she had not, in fact, just had a near-death experience, when she noticed something on her desk. A data pad. Not one of the school ones. Personal. She picked it up. The screen activated automatically, showing a text file. From Vun Li. Kesh is from my world, from the after. She lost more than I did. She is very angry. Angrier than me. I was angry at words. She is angry at everything. I do not know if you can teach her. I do not know if anyone can. But I wanted you to know. She is not evil. Just broken. Like all of us from the after. Your words about your loss, they mattered. I remembered them. I thought you should know that too. I am still trying to understand why words matter. But I think maybe I am starting to. Just a little bit. Thank you, Teacher Una. Even though this is hard. Even though I do not want it to be true. Thank you. Una read it twice. Then a third time. The grammar was imperfect. The structure wandered. Some of the word choices were odd, like Vun Li had translated directly from her own language without quite getting the nuance right. It was the most beautiful thing Una had read in months. She saved the file, backed it up, then sent a reply. Thank you for telling me. We will figure this out together. The response came 30 seconds later. Okay. Together sounds less terrible than alone. Una smiled despite the exhaustion, despite the fear still coursing through her system, despite everything. That night, she pulled up the class files. All of them. Every piece of writing, every exercise, every attempt. The mistakes were everywhere. Misspellings and grammar errors and sentences that made no logical sense. But underneath all of that, beneath the imperfection, there was something real. Quimal's pride struggling with vulnerability. Nubash's enthusiasm fighting with the precision writing required. Flick's razor intelligence trying to adapt to a language system that did not match their thought patterns. Fezzik's cheerful confusion somehow becoming endearing rather than frustrating. And Vun Li. Vun Li's careful, painful journey from one-word defiance to actual communication. Una looked at the first assignment, that Good Morning Teacher exercise from week 1. Looked at all the terrible, earnest attempts. She made a decision. She printed them. Actual physical prints, rare on a space station where everything was digital. Then she went to her quarters and did something that probably seemed ridiculous but felt necessary. She framed them. Every single one. The misspellings and the errors and the proof that these cubs, these predators who were supposed to be unteachable, had tried. She hung the first one, Quimal's Good Morning Teacher, above her desk. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Kesh would continue to resist. The other cubs would struggle with the tension between their growing skills and their cultural identity. There would be setbacks and frustrations, and moments where Una questioned every life choice that had led her to this classroom. But tonight, looking at those framed mistakes, Una felt something she had not felt in a long time. Hope. Complicated, messy, imperfect hope. The best kind. 6 months felt like 6 years and also 6 minutes, which was the kind of temporal paradox that teaching always created. The ceremony hall on Quantum Reach was packed. Parents, station personnel, diplomatic observers, and General Wolf himself, looking slightly uncomfortable in what Una suspected was his dress uniform. The cubs, her cubs, sat in a row on the small stage, looking various degrees of terrified and defiant. Standard graduation emotions, really, just with more claws. Una stood off to the side, watching the crowd settle. This was supposed to be a simple competency demonstration. The cubs would take a written test, maybe answer some verbal questions, prove they had achieved basic proficiency in English. Una had other plans. "You are certain about this?" General Wolf had asked when she submitted her proposal. "Absolutely not," Una had replied. "But I am doing it anyway." Which was how they ended up here, with 5 predator juveniles about to do something no one had asked them to do, which was always the best kind of teaching moment. The lights dimmed. Una stepped to the podium, and her voice carried across the suddenly quiet hall. "Thank you all for coming. 6 months ago, I was given 5 students who did not want to learn, teaching a language they did not value, for reasons they did not understand." She paused, letting that sink in. "Today, they are going to show you what happened when stubbornness met stubbornness and somehow turned into something better." A ripple of curiosity went through the crowd. "Instead of a test," Una continued, "each student has written something personal in English, something that matters to them. They are going to share it with you now. No preparation, no safety net, just them and their words." She could see the parents shifting, uncertain. Could see General Wolf's ears perk up with interest. "Kamal, you are up first." The young reptilian stood, scales shimmering with what Una now recognized as nervousness rather than aggression. He approached the podium, holding his datapad like it might explode. "I wrote about my first hunt," he said, voice steady despite his obvious discomfort. "In my language, we have one word for hunt: Kesh. It means the action, the success, the honor, all together. But when I tried to write it in English, I needed many words. I needed to describe the waiting, the watching, the moment before the strike, the feeling after." He looked down at his datapad, reading slowly but clearly. "I thought my first hunt would make me feel complete. In my language, successful hunt equals complete hunter. But when I wrote about it in human words, I understood something new. The hunt was not one thing. It was many things. Fear and excitement and doubt and pride, all happening at once. English made me see that my one word was hiding complexity, hiding truth." Kumal looked up, directly at his parents in the audience. "I still think Kesh is a better word, more efficient. But now I understand what it costs to be efficient. Sometimes the long way of saying something is the more honest way." He sat down. His parents, massive reptilian warriors who looked like they had never felt an emotion in their lives, were absolutely stunned. Nuabash went next, bounding to the podium with his usual enthusiasm barely contained. "I am going to read something funny," he announced, because volume control remained aspirational. "Teacher Una says humor is hard to translate, so I tried to write a joke in English." What followed was a genuinely terrible joke about a human, a reptilian, and a malfunctioning translation device. The punchline made almost no sense. The grammar was a disaster. The setup took too long. The audience loved it. Nubash beamed, and Una realized he had understood something essential. Connection mattered more than perfection. Flick approached the podium with their characteristic clicking rhythm, mandibles moving in what Una had learned was their version of nervous excitement. "I wrote about communication," Flick said. "My species communicates through chemical signals, through touch, through the frequency of our movements. Adding verbal language, adding written language, felt like adding extra limbs. Awkward. Unnecessary." They paused, antennae twitching. But then I realized, more limbs means more ways to reach across distance. My chemical signals only work close. My touch only works with contact. But words can cross space, can be saved, can be read by someone I will never meet. This is power I did not know I needed until I had it. Simple, profound, very Flick. Fezzik's piece was about food, because of course it was, but he had managed to make it genuinely touching. A description of sharing a meal with his flock, the way food meant safety and family and home. His grammar was still a mess, but the emotion came through clearly. Then it was Kesh's turn. The black feline had remained silent and hostile for most of the 6 months, had done the bare minimum, participated only when forced, radiated contempt like it was her job. But 3 weeks ago, something had shifted. Una still did not know what exactly, but Kesh had started writing, really writing. Late at night, Una would find new files in the shared folder. Attempts, drafts, revisions. Kesh walked to the podium now with the same controlled grace she brought to everything, but her ears were back. Uncertain. "I did not want to be here," she said bluntly. "I do not like humans. I do not like human language. I do not like what the galaxy has become." The audience stirred uncomfortably. This was not typical graduation speech material. But teacher Una told us that language is a weapon, that words are tools, and I understand tools. I understand weapons. Kesh's claws extended slightly, retracted, a gesture of internal conflict. "My people lost our war because we only had one kind of strength. We knew how to fight. We did not know how to negotiate, how to compromise, how to make others see our perspective without violence." She looked directly at Una. "I wrote about what I lost, my home, my family, my future. In my language, loss is simple. Thing is gone, you grieve, you move forward. But in English, there are so many words for loss: grief, sorrow, mourning, anguish, heartbreak. Each one means something slightly different. Each one captures a different piece of what it feels like." Kesh's voice remained steady, but her tail lashed once, emotion breaking through control. "Writing about my loss in English did not fix anything, did not bring anything back. But it helped me understand that my grief is not simple, that I am not just angry, that maybe there is space between losing everything and becoming nothing." Silence. Complete, profound silence. "I still do not like humans," Kesh said, "but I understand them better now. And understanding is the first step to knowing how to fight them. Or how to stop fighting them. I have not decided which yet." She sat down. Una caught Vun Lee's eye. The silver feline nodded, just slightly. Between them, an understanding. They had reached Kesh. Maybe not completely. Maybe not permanently. But they had reached her. Finally, Vun Lee approached the podium. She had been writing for months now. Long, complex pieces that showed real understanding of the language. But what she pulled up on her datapad was short. Simple. "I wrote this on my first day in teacher Una's class," Vun Lee said. "Morning. Just that word. It was all I was willing to give. It was defiance disguised as compliance." She smiled, which Una had never seen before. It was tentative, uncertain, but real. 6 months later, I want to read what I wrote last night. Good morning, Teacher Una. Thank you for not giving up on us. Thank you for teaching us that strength comes in many forms. Thank you for showing us that prey species are not weak, just different. Thank you for your patience with our mistakes. We tried. We are still trying. We will keep trying. Because you taught us that trying, even imperfectly, matters most. Vunli looked up from her datapad, directly at Una. No spelling errors this time. I checked. The audience erupted. Applause, the kind that was genuine rather than polite. Parents who had been skeptical now seeing proof that their cubs had gained something valuable. General Wolf, in the back, nodding approval. But Una barely noticed. She was looking at her students, these impossible, frustrating, wonderful cubs who had started as a punishment assignment and become something infinitely more important. After the ceremony, after the congratulations and the formalities, Una returned to her quarters. The walls were covered now, framed mistakes, every single one. The journey from good morning teacher to perfect grammar, preserved in all its messy glory. Her datapad chimed. New assignment. Another station. Another group of difficult predator juveniles who needed to learn human language. Una looked at her wall of frames, at the evidence that impossible things were possible if you were stubborn enough. She smiled and accepted the assignment. Somewhere in the station, 5 cubs were celebrating with their families, speaking English with varying degrees of proficiency, making mistakes they would correct later, trying in that beautiful imperfect way that meant they cared. And on Una's wall, those first attempts remained. Framed, honored, preserved, not despite being wrong. Because trying, even when you fail, is the bravest thing anyone can do.